It was the early hours of June 13th, 1994. The clock had just struck 1:00 a.m. when a gruesome discovery sent shockwaves through the quiet neighborhood of Brentwood, Los Angeles. The lifeless bodies of Nicole Brown Simpson and Ronald Goldman lay in front of Nicole's home, drenched in blood. The sheer brutality of the scene was staggering. Multiple stab wounds covering their bodies, blood pooling across the ground. The air was thick with the metallic scent of death, and the silence of the night was shattered forever. Now, without further delay, let's unravel one of the most infamous murder cases in American history. In the weeks leading up to that fateful night, Nicole Brown Simpson had been living separately from her ex-husband, former NFL superstar O.J. Simpson. Though their marriage had ended, they still resided in the same upscale neighborhood of Brentwood. On the night of June 12, 1994, everything seemed normal, until it wasn't. Two neighbors would become the unsuspecting discoverers of a brutal crime. Drawn to the scene by the incessant, eerie barking of Nicole's dog, they stumbled upon a nightmare. Now, let's dissect the timeline of events leading up to this crime, step by step. 6:30 p.m. Nicole Brown Simpson, her children, and a few friends arrive at Mezzaluna, a local restaurant, for dinner. The group dines, unaware that this will be the last meal Nicole will ever have. 9:15 p.m. Nicole's sister calls Mezzaluna, inquiring about a pair of glasses their mother might have left behind. 9:30 p.m. Ronald Goldman, a young waiter at Mezzaluna, offers to return the glasses to Nicole's home, unknowingly walking toward his doom. 9:45 p.m. Across town, O.J. Simpson and his houseguest, Brian Cato Kalin, grab a quick bite at a McDonald's. 9:50 p.m. Ronald Goldman leaves Mezzaluna, carrying a small white envelope with the glasses inside. This will be the last time anyone sees him alive. 10:15 p.m. A neighbor of Nicole Brown Simpson hears strange, persistent barking from Nicole's dog. This seemingly insignificant detail will later become a crucial piece of evidence. 10:25 p.m. A limousine arrives at O.J. Simpson's residence. The driver, Alan Park, is there to take him to the airport. O.J. has a red-eye flight to Chicago scheduled for 11:45 p.m. 10:40 p.m. Brian Cato Kalin, still at O.J.'s house, hears three loud thuds against an exterior wall. The sound is distinct and unsettling, but he doesn't investigate. 10:55 p.m. Alan Park, the limo driver, tries calling O.J., who is nowhere to be found. The house is dark, no one answers the intercom, and the driver grows increasingly frustrated as the minutes tick by. 11:00 p.m. Finally, a shadowy figure appears in the driveway. The limousine driver spots a tall man, approximately 6 feet tall, weighing around 200 pounds, moving toward the house. The figure is blurry, indistinct, but the description eerily matches O.J. Simpson. 11:05 p.m. The limousine driver calls again. This time, O.J. picks up. He apologizes, claiming he overslept and had just jumped in the shower before heading out. An odd excuse, considering he had a flight to catch. The inconsistencies in his timeline will later raise suspicions. 11:45 p.m. O.J. Simpson boards his American Airlines flight to Chicago. Unbeknownst to him, back in Brentwood, the horrors of that night are about to unfold. 12:10 a.m. Neighbors make the gruesome discovery. Nicole and Ronald's bodies lay on the pathway outside her home, both brutally stabbed. The scene is drenched in blood. The brutality is almost unimaginable. By 5:00 a.m., detectives arrive at O.J. Simpson's estate, and what they find will send the case into a tailspin. Evidence is scattered across the crime scene and beyond. A blood-stained glove, a wool cap, bloody footprints leading away from the bodies. It is clear that the killer left in a hurry. Meanwhile, as the sun rises over Chicago, O.J. Simpson's plane touches down. He is unaware that, within hours, he will become the prime suspect in one of the most infamous murder cases of the century. What happened next? What evidence did the detectives uncover? And how did this seemingly open and shut case spiral into one of the most controversial trials in American history? Stay tuned as we unravel the details of a case that still haunts the world to this day. Prosecutor Marcia Clark stated that Detective Ron Phillips called O.J. Simpson to inform him of his ex-wife's death. O.J.'s first reaction was not to ask how she died, when she died, or any of the usual questions one might expect in such a situation. Instead, his immediate response was chilling. Who killed her? O.J. Simpson, who was in Chicago at the time, quickly returned to Los Angeles, where he was questioned by the police for 3 hours. However, he was released without charges. But the course of events would take a dramatic turn. On June 17th, just 4 days after the murder, O.J. Simpson was officially charged with the crime. Yet, instead of surrendering, he did the unthinkable. He fled, and from that moment, he was declared a fugitive. What followed was one of the most unforgettable scenes in modern crime history, a slow-speed police chase on the highways of Southern California. O.J. was in the passenger seat of a now iconic white Ford Bronco, driven by his friend Al Cowlings. The chase, broadcast live to millions across the country, was surreal. Cowlings later told the police that he couldn't stop the car because O.J. had a gun to his own head, threatening to take his life. This wasn't just speculation. The police discovered a suicide note written by O.J. himself. We'll get into that note shortly. During the pursuit, law enforcement recorded a phone call between O.J. and homicide detective Tom Lang. Here's a snippet of that call. Music fades in, adding suspense. The chase ultimately ended at O.J. Simpson's Brentwood estate, where he finally surrendered. As the police searched his vehicle, they found a disturbing collection of items: an adhesive mustache, a fake goatee, his passport, and a gun. At the time, O.J. Simpson was one of the most recognizable faces in America. Was his plan really to disguise himself with a fake beard and flee the country unnoticed? Imagine Cristiano Ronaldo walking into an airport with a phony mustache, presenting a passport with his actual name, and expecting to slip away unnoticed. It's almost laughable. At exactly 8:51 p.m., O.J. turned himself in. His so-called suicide note was later examined. In it, he thanked the people who had been a part of his life but adamantly insisted on one crucial point. He was innocent. Everyone knows I had nothing to do with Nicole's murder. I loved her, I still love her, and I always will. If we had problems, it was because of love. Now, let's analyze the suspects. Since O.J. Simpson was the prime suspect, let's break down the theories surrounding his guilt and his possible innocence. Why would O.J. commit such a brutal crime? What could his motive be? O.J. and Nicole had a tumultuous relationship, oscillating between reconciliation and separation. But then, Ronald Goldman entered the picture. His growing closeness with Nicole became increasingly apparent, with neighbors even commenting that their relationship seemed deeper than mere friendship. Though Goldman insisted they were only friends, many believed there was more beneath the surface. Could jealousy have driven O.J. to murder? The prosecution outlined a chilling timeline. The murders occurred at approximately 10:15 p.m., based on the testimony of a neighbor who heard a dog barking frantically. This would have given O.J. enough time to commit the crime, return home just down the street, clean himself up, take a shower, and then leave for the airport at 11:00 p.m. A tight but plausible window of opportunity. Then there was the DNA evidence. A single black leather glove found at the crime scene carried traces of blood from O.J., Nicole, and Goldman. The matching glove, discovered behind O.J.'s home, near the guest house where his friend Kato Kalin was staying, the same area where Kato heard 3 loud thumps against the wall at 10:40 p.m. Further analysis revealed that both gloves carried the DNA of all 3 individuals. When police questioned O.J. the day after the murder, they noticed a fresh cut on his finger. He dismissed it as nothing, covering it with a Band-Aid. But was it really nothing? Then there was the wool cap found at the crime scene. When tested, it contained strands of hair that matched O.J.'s, confirmed by an FBI forensic lab. And inside O.J.'s home, investigators found socks stained with Nicole's blood. How did it get there? Perhaps one of the most damning pieces of evidence: the shoe prints left at the scene, embedded in the victim's blood. The prints matched a rare size 12 Bruno Magli shoe, O.J.'s exact size. Witnesses later confirmed that he owned a pair identical to those in question, yet they were never found. Adding to the weight of the evidence, just days before the murders, O.J. had purchased a knife that closely resembled the one experts believed was used in the attack. That knife was also never recovered. And then there was O.J.'s history of domestic violence. The police had been called to their home multiple times, with reports of abuse spanning years. In 1989, he was convicted of spousal abuse after a particularly violent incident with Nicole. He didn't deny the charges. He simply accepted them. Years later, O.J. even wrote a book titled If I Did It, a so-called hypothetical account of how the murders might have happened. Initially pulled from publication due to public outrage, the book was later released, with profits directed to the family of Ronald Goldman. So why was O.J. acquitted? How did he walk free despite such overwhelming evidence? During the trial, his defense team, known as the Dream Team, cast significant doubt on the integrity of the investigation. They argued that the evidence had been mishandled and contaminated, pointing out that crime scene evidence was left in police vehicles for hours, possibly degrading under heat. They raised questions about the chain of custody, making the jury skeptical of the forensic findings. One of the most memorable moments of the trial came when O.J. was asked to try on the infamous glove found at the crime scene. In front of a stunned courtroom, he struggled to put it on. It appeared too small. This led to the now famous line from defense attorney Johnny Cochran, "If it doesn't fit, you must acquit." The prosecution countered that the glove had been exposed to moisture, frozen and thawed multiple times, which could have altered its size. They also emphasized that O.J.'s DNA was on the glove, making it an undeniable link. But by that point, the damage was done. The jury had doubt. Many argue that O.J. Simpson's acquittal was less about the evidence and more about the social and racial tensions of the time. The trial came shortly after the 1992 Los Angeles riots, which followed the acquittal of the police officers who brutally beat Rodney King. The racial divide in America was at its peak, and many believed the jury's decision was, at least in part, influenced by a deep mistrust of the LAPD. Ultimately, on October 3, 1995, after months of testimony and deliberation, O.J. Simpson was found not guilty. The verdict remains one of the most controversial in American history. Was justice truly served, or did O.J. Simpson get away with murder? The debate continues to this day. In the early 1990s, America was a nation simmering with racial tension. The trial of O.J. Simpson did not just capture public attention, it ignited a firestorm. It was more than a murder case. It became a battleground for issues of race, justice, and corruption within the system. But to truly understand the impact of this case, we must look at the events that preceded it. 1992. Los Angeles erupts in chaos. The city is burning, the streets filled with rage. The cause? The acquittal of 4 LAPD officers who had been caught on tape savagely beating a black man named Rodney King. The verdict sent shockwaves across the country, confirming what many already believed. Justice was not blind. It was prejudiced. This was the atmosphere in which O.J. Simpson was arrested. The media swarmed, and the country divided. But from the moment Simpson was taken into custody, his defense team recognized an opportunity. They knew that the black community, still seething from the Rodney King case, might rally behind their client if they could frame his prosecution as another example of racial injustice. And so, they did. They released footage of O.J. in handcuffs, reinforcing the image of a black man persecuted by the system. At this stage, there was little concrete evidence against him. But the strategy that would shake the foundation of the prosecution was yet to come. The key? Detective Mark Fuhrman. Fuhrman was the first officer to enter O.J.'s estate after the murders. He had scaled the fence, searching for evidence. It was he who allegedly discovered the infamous bloody glove on Simpson's property, one of the prosecution's most damning pieces of evidence. But there was a problem. During the trial, Simpson's defense team played an audio recording of Fuhrman. His voice, dripping with contempt, uttered racial slurs over 40 times in a single conversation. The implications were catastrophic. If Fuhrman harbored such open hatred toward black people, could he have framed O.J.? Could the glove have been planted? The jury, largely composed of black jurors, was left with a question that went beyond evidence. Was this a trial about murder, or was it a trial about systemic racism? Were they to trust the testimony of a man who had been exposed as a virulent racist? In the end, the jury made their decision. O.J. Simpson was not guilty. The courtroom erupted. Some cheered, others sat in stunned silence, but one question remained. If not O.J., then who? There were other suspects. Some believed in the involvement of a serial killer named Glenn Rogers. In a documentary, Rogers' brother claimed that before Glenn was executed, he confessed to murdering Nicole Brown Simpson and Ronald Goldman. He alleged that O.J. had even hired him to break into Nicole's home and steal a pair of earrings, under orders that, if she resisted, he should eliminate her. But there was a flaw in this theory. Rogers had been in prison during the murders. The confession, if true, was nothing more than the desperate words of a condemned man. Then came another theory, one even more controversial. Some investigators turned their gaze toward O.J.'s own son, Jason Simpson. Jason had a troubling history. He had been under legal supervision for attacking a former employer with a knife. He had assaulted his ex-girlfriend. Another woman, a friend of Jason's, claimed that he had once thrown her so violently against a bathroom floor that she thought her spine would snap. But perhaps, most disturbingly, Jason had been diagnosed with severe rage disorders. Round the time of the murders, he had stopped taking his prescribed medication. Medical records showed he had repeatedly told doctors, "I'm going to lose it." The private investigator Bill Deere, one of the few to be inducted into the Hall of Fame of Private Investigators, was convinced of Jason's guilt. He had even published a book titled, "O.J. is Innocent and I Can Prove It." Deere's theory was shocking. O.J. had arrived at the crime scene that night, but not as a killer. He was there to protect his son. But was this true? Jason had an alibi. He had been working at a restaurant. Yet, according to Deere, the work attendance sheet had been handwritten, unlike the printed sheets from previous days. This discrepancy cast doubt on whether Jason had truly been there. Then there was the piece of evidence that made many shudder, a photograph of Jason wearing a wool cap, nearly identical to one found at the crime scene. If Jason had been the real killer, had O.J.'s erratic behavior following the murders been out of guilt? Or was it the desperation of a father shielding his son? Despite these theories, O.J. was never truly exonerated in the court of public opinion. He lived under the shadow of suspicion, and in 2007, he found himself on the wrong side of the law once again. This time, it was in Las Vegas, an armed robbery gone wrong. In 2008, he was convicted on 12 charges, including armed robbery and kidnapping, and was sentenced to 33 years in prison. This time, there was no race narrative, no elaborate defense strategies, just the cold hand of justice. Over the years, public perception of O.J. shifted. A CNN poll showed that in 1994, 66% of Americans believed he was guilty. By 2014, that number had risen to 83%. The world had made up its mind. But who was O.J. Simpson? A football legend? A Hollywood star? A victim? Or a killer who got away? The answer, perhaps, depends on who you ask.